I never meant to notice her. She was just there, most mornings, in the corner seat of the cafe below my apartment. Same gray scarf looped twice around her neck, same chipped thermos she carried like it meant more than it should. The first time our eyes met, it wasn't anything cinematic. She was stirring her coffee, absent-minded, and I looked up from my notebook at the exact moment she glanced over. No smile. Just a small flicker of recognition, like she'd seen me before. The next morning, I caught myself lingering by the counter longer than usual. I ordered the same thing I always did, black coffee, nothing fancy, and when the barista repeated it out loud, I thought I saw her mouth move in sync with the words. Like she already knew. Maybe it was coincidence. But the third morning, when the barista called out my order, she looked up, met my eyes, and said, quiet enough that I almost missed it, "Black, no sugar." I froze, halfway to reaching for the cup. She didn't laugh at herself for saying it. Just tucked her hair behind her ear and returned to her book. I sat down 2 tables away, pretending to scroll my phone. But I wasn't really reading anything. My screen stayed on one thread, a half-typed message I'd been drafting to a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. It just said, "Hey, you around?" I never pressed send. Instead, I found myself glancing at her hands. She held the book gently, almost cautiously, like it could fall apart. Her thumb traced the edge of the page before turning it. I noticed her ring finger was bare. I shouldn't have noticed that, but I did. We didn't speak again until a week later. The cafe was nearly empty that day, the kind of afternoon where the rain against the windows sounded louder than the low music overhead. She was seated at her usual table, and I hesitated before sitting near her. She looked up as I set my cup down, and for a second, I thought I'd overstepped. But then she said, "You always come in with a notebook. Trying to make it look like I'm writing something." I replied, my voice too quick. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. "Does it work?" "Sometimes." I flipped the notebook closed, tapping the cover lightly with my fingers, suddenly aware of how restless I must have looked. We didn't talk much more. Just a few scattered words about the rain, the way the cafe kept the lights dim even in the afternoon. But it was enough that when I left, I caught myself checking the reflection in the window, not of me, but of her still sitting there, head bowed over her book. That night, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Just one line, "You left your pen on the table. Want to come get it?" I stared at the message, thumb hovering above the screen. I hadn't given her my number. And yet there it was. I didn't reply right away. I just sat on the edge of my bed, the pen already in my pocket, wondering if I'd actually left it behind, or if she had simply wanted a reason that I didn't go down for the pen right away. I waited until the next morning, half expecting the whole thing to feel like a mistake, like maybe I'd imagined it. But she was there, in her corner seat, thermos in front of her. When I walked in, she didn't wave or call me over. She just looked up, and the corner of her mouth lifted like she'd been waiting. "You forgot this," she said softly, sliding the pen across the table. I took the seat opposite her without asking. "Thanks. You must like it," she added. "It's worn down near the grip. It's the only one I've managed to keep from high school." I laughed once, too quickly, then shook my head. "Kind of pathetic, huh?" Her eyes softened. "Not pathetic. It means you hold on to things." I wasn't sure if she meant the pen or something else. We fell into an uneasy quiet, the kind where either person wants to move first. She stirred her tea slowly, the spoon barely clinking against the porcelain. I folded the napkin in front of me, edge over edge, until it was a tight square. Finally she said, "I used to come here with my husband. Before the divorce." It was the first personal thing she'd offered. She didn't look at me when she said it. I nodded, unsure how much to ask. "Do you still talk to him?" Her hand paused on the spoon. A small shake of the head. "Not really. He has a new life. I suppose I do too, in a way." I wanted to ask what that meant. Instead, I just said, "Do you like it here?" Her eyes flicked up, catching mine. "Most days. Until the nights get too long." Something in my chest tightened. I thought about my own nights, sitting in my room with the lamp on, phone glowing, scrolling through contacts I never called. I imagined saying that to her, confessing that I was lonelier than I wanted to admit. But the words stalled somewhere in my throat. We didn't speak much after that. Just sat in the kind of silence that felt less empty than usual. She shifted once, brushing her scarf back over her shoulder, and the faintest trace of her perfume reached me. When I finally stood to leave, she reached across the table, fingers grazing the pen in my hand. "Try not to lose it again," she said, a little smile pulling at her lips. Her touch lingered for only a second, but it felt heavier than the words themselves. As I stepped out into the cool air, I kept replaying that moment, the warmth of her skin against mine, the way her voice had dipped lower. It was just a gesture. Just a reminder about a pen. But it stayed with me all night, like she had meant something more. It became a rhythm. Morning coffee. A few quiet words. A glance that lasted a beat too long. One evening, though, I saw her outside the cafe. Not at her usual table, not with her scarf or thermos. Just standing near the corner, keys in her hand, like she wasn't sure where to go next. I almost walked past. Almost. "You're out late," I said, my voice low, unsure if it sounded like an invitation or just an observation. She smiled faintly. "Couldn't sleep. Thought tea might help." I nodded, shifting the bag on my shoulder. The street was nearly empty, the cafe lights spilling warm against the pavement. For a moment, it felt like we were the only two people left in the city. "Want company?" The words slipped out before I thought better of them. She hesitated. Not long, but enough that I noticed. Then she said, "Sure." Inside, the cafe was nearly closing. Only one barista, wiping down counters. We took a corner booth this time, side by side instead of across. She ordered chamomile. I ordered nothing, just sat there, fingers tapping against the table. After a while, she said quietly, "My son's about your age." The words landed heavier than I expected. I didn't know what to say. "Do people ever notice?" I asked, immediately regretting it. Her lips pressed together. "They would. If there was something to notice." The silence stretched. I traced a line on the tabletop with my finger, forcing myself not to look directly at her. But I could feel her gaze, soft but steady, like she was daring me to answer. And then, like a knife through the air, the barista's voice. "We're closing in 10. We both startled, laughing under our breath, but it broke the moment. She sipped her tea quickly, as if it might anchor her. I folded and refolded the napkin until my hands felt clumsy. When we stood, I moved to hold the door for her. She brushed past, her sleeve grazing my arm. The touch was nothing, barely contact at all, but it sent a jolt through me. Outside, she stopped beneath the streetlight, looking up at the rain just beginning to fall. "I should go," she murmured. I nodded, though my chest tightened. "Yeah. Of course." But neither of us moved. Just stood there, rain speckling the pavement, our shoulders inches apart. She finally turned, her face close enough that I could see the fine lines at her eyes, the way her breath fogged faintly in the cool air. "Good night," she whispered. It sounded like she wanted to say more. Maybe I did too. For a heartbeat, I thought she might lean in. I felt myself lean almost imperceptibly toward her. But then she stepped back. A small shake of her head, like she was reminding herself of something. And just like that, the moment dissolved. I watched her walk away, every step echoing louder than the rain. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour when shadows stretch long and everything feels a little fragile. I found her sitting on the bench outside the cafe, scarf draped over her lap instead of around her neck. She looked tired, though maybe it was just the light. I sat beside her without asking. For a while neither of us spoke. Just the sound of cars passing, a dog barking somewhere down the block. Then she said, almost to herself, "I saw you the other day. Walking with that girl from the building." It took me a second to catch up. "Emma? She borrowed my charger." Her mouth tightened, then loosened again, like she regretted saying anything. Of course. I shifted on the bench, restless. Why does that matter? She let out a soft laugh. It doesn't. It shouldn't. But her hands twisted the scarf in her lap, knotting and unknotting it. I watched, unsure if I should press or stay quiet. The silence stretched until I felt it in my chest. Finally I said, I don't look at her the way I look at you. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and searching. Don't say that. Why not? My voice cracked more than I wanted it to. Because you don't know what it means. I do, I whispered. And maybe I did. Or maybe I just wanted to believe I did. She turned away, staring at the street. You make me forget how old I am. That's dangerous. The words stung more than I expected. I wanted to reach for her hand, to prove something I couldn't put into words. But I stayed still. She exhaled slowly, shoulders softening. You make me feel young again. The sentence hung between us, fragile as glass. I searched her face, waiting for her to laugh it off, to retreat into something safer. But she didn't. She just kept staring at the ground, fingers loosening on the scarf, like she'd finally let slip something she'd been holding too tightly. My heart hammered. I leaned closer, not enough to cross the line, just enough that I could feel the warmth of her arm beside mine. My voice faltered. I tried again. I don't want this to just disappear. Her head turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. 1,000 things unsaid pressed between us. The air was too still. Too expectant. Then she whispered, almost inaudible. And what if it can't last? The question lingered like a hand on the back of my neck, pulling me forward. I opened my mouth, ready to answer, and then stopped. Because maybe she wasn't really asking me. The next morning, her seat was empty. I told myself she was late, or busy, or maybe just tired of the cafe. But when the second day passed, and the third, something hollow began to take shape in me. I still went, still ordered the same black coffee, still sat near the corner table as if she might walk in any second. But the chair across from me stayed empty, and I found myself folding napkins into smaller and smaller squares, until they tore in my hands. By the fourth day, I gave up pretending not to care. I texted her. Just 2 words, you okay? The bubble appeared. Then vanished. No reply. That night, though, a message came. Not an answer to mine, not really. Just, my son's visiting. I think it's best if we pause. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. I didn't reply. The next time I saw her was by accident. Grocery store, late evening. She had a cart half full with vegetables and wine, and beside her, a tall boy, my age, maybe younger. He was laughing at something she said, nudging her shoulder like sons do. I froze by the freezer section, a carton of milk sweating in my hand. She looked up once, caught my eyes across the aisle, and then looked away too quickly. I didn't approach. Didn't even nod. After that, I stopped going to the cafe for a while. It felt pointless, like waiting for a play where the actors never returned to the stage. But every night, when I scrolled through my phone, my thumb hovered over her name. I typed and erased 6 things. I miss you. It doesn't matter. Say something. None of them sent. One evening, I went back to the cafe. The corner table was taken by someone else. I sat near the window, staring at the street. Halfway through my coffee, I almost stood up, almost walked the 2 blocks to her building, almost knocked on her door. But I didn't. Instead, I walked home slow, the city buzzing around me. And I kept thinking, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence that I saw her again on a Sunday evening. Not at the cafe, not in passing, but by accident, standing in front of her building with a bag of groceries at her feet, fumbling with her keys. I almost kept walking. But she looked up, and when her eyes found mine, something in her face softened, like relief mixed with dread. Hi, I said. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. She nodded once, then bent to pick up the bag. I stepped forward. Here, let me. Our hands brushed as I lifted it from her. Neither of us pulled away too quickly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon and old wood. She led me to the kitchen, setting down her scarf on a chair. I placed the bag on the counter. For a moment, we just stood there, side by side, as if we'd forgotten how to start. Finally, she said, "I didn't mean to disappear." I let the words settle before answering. "You did, though." Her shoulders tensed. "My son, he stayed longer than I expected. It didn't feel right." I nodded, though something in me wanted to argue. Instead, I leaned against the counter, folding my arms tight. "You could have just told me." She exhaled slow. "I didn't know how." The silence that followed wasn't angry, just heavy. She poured water into a glass, but her hand shook faintly. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Do you want me here?" Her eyes flicked up, startled. For a second, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, softly, "Yes. But I shouldn't." The words cut and soothed at the same time. I swallowed hard. "You said I make you feel young." Her mouth curved into something between a smile and a wince. "And you make me feel reckless." "That scares me." I let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it died quickly. My hand hovered on the counter, fingers twitching toward hers. "If this is nothing," I whispered, "tell me, and I'll stop showing up." Her gaze locked on mine. No flinch. No escape. Just two people standing too close in a too small kitchen. "I don't want it to be nothing," she said finally. The admission was barely audible, but it carried more weight than anything else she'd said to me. For a long moment neither of us moved. Then, carefully, she set her glass down, and her hand brushed against mine on the counter. Not holding. Not grabbing. Just resting there, light as breath. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Her eyes softened, and the faintest smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "Okay," she whispered. And that was enough. Weeks passed, but not like before. We found a rhythm again, slower this time, more careful. No declarations, no promises that sounded like vows. Just mornings at the cafe, evenings when I'd help her carry groceries, nights where silence felt less like distance and more like rest. She didn't always take the corner seat anymore. Sometimes she joined me at the window, the one where the light caught her hair in the mornings. She still brought her thermos, still ordered tea when the afternoons dragged. I still got black coffee, no sugar. And when our eyes met across the table, it didn't feel like a question anymore. It felt like an answer. We didn't erase the complications. Her son still visited sometimes, filling her apartment with noise I didn't quite belong to. My friends still asked why I disappeared so often. Life didn't bend around us, it just carried on. But in the quiet spaces, we found each other. One evening, we walked past the park where she'd once admitted I made her feel young. The same bench was empty, shadows stretching long across the grass. I stopped without meaning to. She noticed, slowing beside me. "You remember?" she said softly. I nodded, watching her fingers brush along the wooden slat before sitting. I joined her, the way I had before, but this time the silence was intense. It was full. We sat until the streetlights flickered on. She leaned against me, her head light on my shoulder. No words, no unfinished sentences, just the quiet rhythm of two people who had stopped running from what they already knew. The next morning, at exactly 8:47, she walked into the cafe. Not late, not early. Just then. She didn't sit in the corner or by the window. She sat across from me, placed her thermos on the table, and smiled in a way that felt like a decision. "I almost forgot my scarf," she said, though we both knew she hadn't. I folded the napkin in my hand, neat and square, before letting it go. "Stay a while?" I asked. Her eyes softened. "Okay." And that was enough. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in half-drunk cups of tea, in the same seat taken every morning, in the way silence begins to feel like home. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?